Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is always the same. Take the source material you, our listener, the learner, share with us, strip away the narrative noise, and deliver the core knowledge and surprising insights directly to you. Today, we are diving into a story that many of us think we know pretty well, but I promise you we are going far, far deeper than the big screen ever allowed.
That's absolutely right. The sources shared by our listener are excerpts from Michael Oher's memoir, I Beat the Odds, From Homelessness to the Blind Side and Beyond. We're really peeling back the layers on his journey and focusing pretty intensely not just on the professional football career that followed, but the unbelievably urgent and complicated years that led up to it.
Right.
This deep dive, it really moves beyond a simple sports triumph. It's a critical look at the systemic challenges facing, the nearly 500,000 children navigating the American foster care system right now.
And the name Michael Oher, or, the cultural shorthand, the blind side, that's our entry point. It's that familiar hook that draws you in. But our true mission here is to understand the crucial, often untold journey that happened before all of that. The years of intense instability in a place called Hurt Village, his time bouncing through a failing foster system, and the relentless, almost fanatical determination that was necessary just for him to survive.
And Oher makes it very clear why he wrote the book. He had two main goals. The first one was personal, to tell his story in his own voice, without the Hollywood gloss, clarifying what the system did to him, and just as importantly, what he did for himself.
And the second goal.
The second, and I think this is the far more compelling goal, was to provide a voice and, crucially, a blueprint of hope for those children caught in the system today. He really wants his book to be a roadmap for them.
Okay, let's unpack this and immediately quantify the statistical uphill battle Oher talks about for children cared for by the state. When you look at the raw data, the odds are just. They are truly stacked against kids like me, as he puts it.
They really are.
Let's just look at the academic side first. Less than half of children who spend time in the state foster system will ever graduate from high school.
Right there. That fact alone is terrifying.
It is, and it immediately sets the context for his later academic struggles, which we'll definitely get into.
And for those who drop out, the outcomes are just catastrophically dire. You're looking at a self-perpetuating cycle of hopelessness that often lands these kids right in the prison system. The source material details that of the boys who drop out, somewhere between 50 and 60% will be imprisoned for violent crimes or spend significant time locked up by their mid-30s.
50 to 60%.
Yeah. It's an institutional certainty of failure for the majority of boys in the system.
And if that wasn't devastating enough, the statistics for girls are, well, equally chilling.
And they serve to just keep that cycle going.
Exactly. Girls who grow up in this unstable environment are 6 times more likely to have children before the age of 21 than girls raised in stable families. And here's the most heartbreaking part of that. More than half of the children born to these teenage mothers who were themselves in foster care will end up right back in the foster care system too.
Exactly. So when you put Oher's ultimate success against that backdrop, you realize he wasn't just beating the odds, he was defying this institutional certainty of failure that these numbers represent.
And he really challenges the narrative that suggests he needed some sort of outside intervention just to survive.
He does. He directly addresses a quote that became part of the sensationalist narrative around his story.
Where Leanne Tui was quoted suggesting he would either be dead or a gang bodyguard without them.
That's the one. Oher stresses that he believes that had to be a gross misquote, and he states it so firmly, failure was not an option for me.
And that's such a profound insight into his character, one that the movie just, largely glossed over.
It completely missed it. Anyone suggesting he would have ended up face down in a gutter somewhere is missing the huge, complicated journey that started long before the Tuohys ever came into the picture.
Right.
He was determined to make something of himself with or without outside help. The Tuohys, they helped him reach his highest potential, but that underlying drive, that survival mechanism, it was already fully formed years before.
To really understand that self-made determination, we have to look at the environment Oher called home from about age 11 up until high school. Hurt Village in Memphis.
And he says the name really did fit the place. He describes it as an environment where everything and everyone just felt hurt, broken, depressed, beaten down.
And what's fascinating here is the normalization of that trauma. As a child, he could only understand the world through his daily experiences. So until he saw another stable way of life, the constant dysfunction, the lockouts, the hunger, the violence, it all just seemed totally normal.
It was only later, when he was exposed to suburban life that he realized the sheer abnormality of his childhood. It's a powerful defense mechanism.
And the culture of survival in Hurt Village, it was built around this intense, short-term planning. He describes how begging and bumming was just a way of life.
And the cycle was brutally predictable. It was tied directly to government checks and paychecks. The beginning of the month, when the money arrived, life was briefly, almost magically good.
But for the rest of the month,
The money was gone, instantly. And that meant lockouts, scrounging for food, constantly trying to find someone else's floor to sleep on. There was no sense of saving because the future was just too uncertain.
right? Just pure survival.
Pure survival. He recalls wandering the streets north of downtown Memphis without even realizing he was in one of the most historically important areas of American history. In Hurt Village, none of that mattered.
Yet, amidst all this chaos, Oher found this fascinating self-imposed structure through sports. He shared a great anecdote about the real football fields of Hurt Village.
Yes, they didn't have names on them, but they had roles. The regular season field and the playoff field.
And they followed the NFL schedule religiously.
They did. It speaks to that desperate need for order. They played full tackle, sometimes with older guys up to 22 years old, and had the famous 10 Mississippi rule for quarterbacks, just to make sure the ball got thrown quickly.
A brutal but structured version of play.
Right, and it mirrored the constant danger that defined the neighborhood itself. And that danger, you really can't overstate it.
No. The source notes the two big gangs were the Vice Lords and the Gangster Disciples. And while all-out shootouts were rare, they did happen.
And Oher describes his most scared moment. It's just awful.
Yeah.
Was watching a baby get shot during an argument between two older men.
To witness that as a child, it just profoundly colors everything else we're about to discuss. It makes the dream he eventually conceived feel less like a career aspiration and more like
A life raft. Absolutely. This was the environment he was desperate to escape.
And that desperation, it finally crystallized into a dream when he was just 7 years old. This pivotal moment happened right around the same time social workers were taking his youngest siblings from the home. And amidst all that personal chaos, he watched the 1993 NBA Finals. The Chicago Bulls versus the Phoenix Suns.
And Michael Jordan, in that moment, provided this clear, tangible, and completely secure path out of poverty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oher recognized that Jordan's fame and success meant one critical thing in his young life. MJ was never going to go hungry.
And that concept of being able to provide fundamental security, a constant supply of food and shelter, that became the ultimate driving force for his life. Athletics became the first real career he recognized that offered that kind of security.
This realization, it created an immediate divide in his world. He contrasted those who just wanted to become something, who often fell into drugs or gangs because it was the easy route, versus those who were actually working to become something.
And working meant what, exactly?
Working meant showing up to school, being responsible, and diligently studying players and strategy. Oher knew even then he wanted to be in that smaller working group, even if it meant being lonely sometimes. That fierce drive to escape was, it was fueled by years of just unrelenting chaos.
So let's go even further back and really look at the extreme instability that was Oher's reality from, age 2 onward.
It's unbelievable. Oher's first memory, the furthest back he can reach, was at age 2. He remembers walking down the highway with his older brothers looking for shelter because the house was locked up and they had nowhere to go.
Wow.
And he notes that memory, it just symbolized his entire childhood. Always trying to get somewhere better than where I was while the rest of the world rushed by and with no real guidance at all.
And the details of this housing insecurity, they're staggering. He described living under a bridge for a couple of weeks, and Runt's 7 children and their mother lived in a car for a whole month. Right. Eviction was common, power and water were frequently shut off. He described his mother's pattern. When she was sober, she worked hard, but when she relapsed into her old habits, life just fell apart so quickly, and the kids were left to fend for themselves.
And the family structure itself was huge and complex. He had 11 siblings total. 9 boys, 3 girls with different fathers, but they all shared the mother's surname, Oher.
It's important to note the burden that placed on the older boys, especially Marcus, the oldest. He really took on a parental role.
Ensuring they had food, brushed their teeth, showed up at school.
Right. But Oher acknowledged that, a child can only do so much. Marcus tried his best, but he could never truly be a replacement for stable parenting.
And yet, despite all that chaos and lack of parental direction, he felt this deep bond. He says he never once remembers hearing the words "I love you" from any family member, yet he still felt that powerful connection.
Which is why the separation was so terrifying for him. Losing that core group was the ultimate threat to his sense of security.
And that fear, it completely defined their relationship with the state authorities. When they first entered the foster care system, the adults, especially social workers like Bobby Spivey, they were just the bad guys.
They saw Miss Spivey as mean because she was the one threatening to split them up. He recognized later that she genuinely cared and was trying to fight for them within a broken system, but as kids.
As kids, you can't see past that existential threat of separation.
Not at all.
Because they knew the authorities were coming. Marcus had actually pulled together these little family meetings.
To plan their escape, right?
Yeah, detailing the escape plan for when the officials finally came. It was their way of trying to seize some control.
And the day it happened, it was just a sudden scramble. Omer remembers the men in suits arriving and all the boys just running out the back door, hopping the fence, trying to hide.
He ran to an old body and tire shop on the corner.
He climbed up onto the two-story roof and hid. And he felt this fleeting moment of pride in his quickness until he watched his little sister Denise get driven away in the car.
And in that moment, he realized all their planning hadn't mattered. The grown-up world had won anyway. That feeling of utter defeat in the face of institutional power is it's a defining trauma.
It is. After about a year of this back and forth running, being with his mother, Oher, and his brother, Carlos, were finally taken from school and brought to the home of a woman named Velma Jones. Everyone called her Twin.
And this was one of the first truly structured environments he had ever experienced.
Velma was this incredible figure imposing a discipline that was completely unknown to Oher. Despite the house being tiny, 9 people, 7 of them boys, she maintained these strict rules.
A mandated bedtime, mandatory chores, and non-negotiable school attendance. For Oher, who was used to life being optional, this was a massive and, I imagine, pretty irritating adjustment.
He really struggled with it, especially being forced into after-school daycare at age 7. He felt insulted by it.
Because he'd already been on the streets, fending for himself.
Exactly. He saw himself as an adult and felt profoundly put down by having to go to daycare. He felt his life experiences warranted respect, not babysitting.
But there were positive experiences with Velma, too.
Showing the dual nature of these placements. On weekends, he sold newspapers on corners, sometimes making $70 or $80 a day, which gave him a sense of earning and independence.
They also took camping trips outside of Memphis.
Right, in an old trailer. It gave him a chance to see something other than the city and Hurt Village, just expanding his sense of what's possible.
The supervised visits, though, those were emotionally crushing.
Yeah, they underscored everything that was still broken. Twice a month, all the foster parents would drive the siblings to the Department of Children's Services, the DCS office, for a reunion. It often took 3 or 4 cars just to get everyone there.
And Oher described this routine as feeling like getting teased, just being reminded of what he'd lost, only to have it snatched away again.
He would often hang back during the visits, just watching everyone else, trying to lock those images of togetherness into his memory. And afterward, every single night following one of those visits, he would cry himself to sleep.
So sad.
He was just confused why they couldn't be together if they loved each other. Miss Spivey, the social worker, later confessed to him that she cried after those visits too, heartbroken by their obvious bond and her inability to really ease his pain within the system's limits.
That deep sadness, that feeling of having everything pulled away and the inability of the system to truly reunite him with his family, it led directly to Oher developing his signature coping mechanism.
Running.
Right, he became a habitual runner.
Which is the term for kids who leave foster care to seek out biological family or just return to the streets. And Oher always headed back to his mother's house, seeking that stability of blood, even though he knew the environment there was fundamentally unstable.
And his mother's reaction was so mixed, which really highlights her own conflict about his care.
Right. Sometimes she would march him right back to Velma's house, relieved that someone else was taking care of him. But other times, she would let him stay, using her knowledge of the law, refusing to open the door to authorities without a court order.
Even if Oher was peeking through the curtains.
Yeah. Running, for him, it was this vital, even if destructive way to reclaim some agency in a life where all the big decisions were being made by the grown-up world.
He didn't see it as acting out. It was a desperate way of coping.
Exactly. He preferred to be hungry and sleeping on the floor, with family over temporary foster comfort that lacked that fundamental, irreplaceable emotional connection.
And this desire to seek out biological family, even if the situation is worse, is actually confirmed by research. He cites a University of Chicago study on runaways.
And it found that the #1 reason kids flee is to find family, because they equate it with being normal.
So even though Oher was placed with his brother Carlos and had regular visits, actions researchers recommend to minimize trauma, it still didn't negate his profound, overwhelming desire to run back to his mom.
And the running was ultimately seen as disruptive behavior. After 2 years with Velma, he was moved, partially because of it. Over the next year, he bounced around 3 or 4 more homes.
Which really revealed the two sides of the foster care system. The genuinely caring parents versus those who were just in it for the monthly state check.
And the system, meanwhile, was focused entirely on his quietness, his reserve, misinterpreting his silence as deeply repressed anger or pent-up rage.
But the truth, as he reveals in the memoir, was so different. I wasn't mad, I was sad. I was a heartbroken little kid.
His silence wasn't defiance, it was deep frustration and sadness. He felt they had the power to fix his life, to put his family back together, but they were unwilling or unable to do it.
This profound misinterpretation of his emotional state, mistaking sadness for anger, led to him being institutionalized.
Yeah, at age 10, Oher was placed in St. Joseph's Hospital's adolescent unit for observation and treatment for these perceived anger issues. The irony, of course, is that it was right near the famous St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
He felt completely dehumanized. He described it as an institution with keypads and card scans, locked up without being told his crime.
It just confirmed his worst fears about the grown-up world.
It's just heartbreaking. While the staff focused on treating his supposed rage, Oher was just grappling with these deep feelings of confusion and sadness, wondering why they couldn't all be together.
Right. The system was trying to medicate the symptoms, but ignoring the deep root cause, the trauma of separation.
Interestingly, his only positive takeaway from that 2-week stay was his growing love for movies.
Because choosing a video from the VCR shelf was a rare, empowering decision for a kid who felt all agency had been taken away. But he decided pretty quickly he was done with the DCS. He left St. Joseph's after 2 weeks, tired of the inaction.
He was almost 11. And his sudden release, it was less a planned success and more just a systemic failure, right?
Absolutely. This is important context. Oher was part of the Tennessee child welfare system right before a major federal lawsuit forced a complete cleanup due to abysmal management, disorganization, and lost records. His own files mostly disappeared during this period.
So that chaos is key. His release really just meant no one came after him again.
Exactly. And it was a relief, but it led to disappointment. He went home to his mother, but the family unit was fractured. Older brothers were aging out. Younger siblings were adopted and gone. The old life was over.
And yet that foster care system, as much as he hated it, it taught him some crucial lessons.
It did. Discipline, responsibility, the value of regular school attendance. And by age 11, he was 5'7", too big to be ignored, and ready to start applying those lessons to a new, self-driven goal.
So returning to Hurt Village, even to a new 3-bedroom house that he said felt briefly like a mansion, it brought immediate disappointment. The old habits returned quickly.
Oher, who was growing so rapidly, found himself having to go back to shoplifting, not candy this time, but meat and full meals from the grocery store, purely out of necessity because his mother rarely kept food in the house.
But academically, he had this breakthrough year that really set the stage for everything that followed.
In 7th grade, he was placed in the Ida B. Wells School, which was located in the basement of Manassas High. And this school was specifically designed for kids who were significantly behind their grade level.
And he thrived there.
He thrived because the teachers were incredibly committed and caring, and they made him see for the first time that real learning was possible and, useful.
But outside of that classroom, external guidance was still intermittent. And this forced Oher to develop this just astonishing level of internal self-mentorship.
He talks about developing an internal compass, constantly asking himself questions.
Yeah, like, is this a smart decision? What are the consequences of hanging out with these guys? Do I want the thrill of being a thug as much as I want to get out of this neighborhood someday?
And that ability to pause, to assess consequences, and choose the path with delayed gratification, that's what truly set him apart. He realized everyone around him was focused only on the here and now.
His focus then sharpened on sports as his definitive ticket out of the neighborhood. He saw girls having babies, boys joining gangs, and he realized he needed to secure that next step immediately.
And he wasn't just watching games, he was studying them deeply. observing player movement, learning strategy, and recognizing that college was the required next step, even if it had to be a junior college to get his foot in the door.
This sharpened focus led to the introduction of Big Tony Henderson.
A large man who had boxed in his youth and understood the specific challenges of being a big kid in that environment. Tony recruited Oher, then in 8th grade, to his AAU basketball team in Hurt Village.
And Oher's discipline was immediate and striking.
It was. If practice was at 5:00 p.m., he was at the gym at 4:30. He says he was fanatical about it, never missing practice, never being late.
And Tony soon pulled some strings, using an uncle's address, to move Oher into Westwood High School, a better district, so he could keep training with Tony's son, Steve.
This relationship with Tony was so crucial because it taught Oher how to trust an authority figure. He notes that many inner-city coaches discover talent purely for personal gain, expecting payback later.
But Tony wasn't like that.
Not at all. He was genuinely concerned with Oher's development and well-being, helping him learn how to trust an adult whose motives were pure.
And that trust led to Oher realizing he couldn't stay trapped in the cycle of his mother's instability. He started staying over at Tony Henderson's house permanently.
A decision Tony and his wife fully supported. The Hendersons weren't rich, but they were self-sufficient, had structure, and provided the stability Oher admired.
Proving that the ghetto doesn't have an iron grip on a determined family.
Exactly. The next step was a move to the private school environment of Briarcrest. Tony, fulfilling a promise to his deceased mother, wanted a Christian education for Steve, and Oher was determined to follow.
But he was rejected immediately. His grades were too low and his records were just a complete mess.
So the compromise was Gateway Academy, an alternative school, for a year to raise his grades, but he found himself completely lost in the material there.
He said he struggled immensely because he never learned how to study, how to take notes, or even the basic English grammar he needed for Spanish class. He just couldn't translate his innate intelligence into academic performance.
This moment is so critical. He was overwhelmed. He knew Briarcrest and sports were his one chance, yet he lacked the foundational tools. After several months, Tony called Briarcrest and convinced them to reconsider, arguing purely based on Oher's effort and dedication.
And Briarcrest offered a condition. He could not play sports until his grades improved, and he had to use their educational support system program, the ESS.
And this is where the Briarcrest faculty truly snapped into action to help him. We should be clear, ESS wasn't just a basic tutoring hour. It was specialized support designed to close those foundational gaps.
Mrs. Beasley, his biology teacher, was instrumental. She realized that Oher wasn't slow, he just lacked foundational instruction. She saw that he could answer complex questions orally, but struggled intensely with reading tests.
So she implemented specific strategies. She would test him orally on material, allowing him to demonstrate knowledge without the barrier of poor reading comprehension.
He started taking extra classes at 6:30 in the morning, before school even started, reviewing homework and foundation material relentlessly.
And this dedicated support, it finally unlocked his potential. Oher realized he couldn't just coast anymore. He found immense joy in learning how to learn writing his first research papers, successfully memorizing famous passages for English class. He became an eager student.
So despite this incredible academic and athletic commitment he was making at Briarcrest, Oher was still cycling through temporary homes, the Franklins, the Sparks, the Saunders.
He often had no reliable place to go during breaks, which made him constantly nervous about calling Child Protective Services, fearing being pulled back into that system he hated.
And this is the context for when he finally stayed with the Tuays Leanne, Sean, Collins, and SJ one evening after a track meet.
And the Tuohys quickly became fundamentally different from the temporary housing he'd relied on. They offered emotional permanence, not just shelter.
They treated him as family. Leanne would tell him, "I love you," every night, which he said was jarring at first, but he eventually started to believe it.
And crucially, they insisted he maintain ties with his birth family. They even offered his mother a job at one of Sean's Taco Bells to help her stabilize.
Right. And this went against Oher's own survival instinct. He was terrified of the old neighborhood's magnet pull, but he went every other week to see his brothers.
It showed that the Tuohys respected his emotional bonds. The relationship was formalized just after he graduated high school, when Oher became a legal member of the family. The court hearing was remarkably quick.
And a massive piece of his transition and academic success during this time was Miss Sue, who was hired as a full-time tutor.
Her commitment was staggering. She would come over 5 nights a week for 4 hours at a time, often working until 10 p.m.
And she didn't just teach him material, she taught him skills. She reinforced the work done by Mrs. Beasley. advanced note-taking, time management.
And she helped him leverage his natural ability to memorize football plays into academic memorization techniques. She built his confidence, and her dedication was so complete that when Oher went to Ole Miss, she applied for a tutoring job there, moving to Oxford to continue supporting him.
His academic and athletic commitment paid off exponentially. Although basketball was his first love, he discovered his true calling at left tackle. And the source material has an astonishing statistic.
Yes. During 2 years of varsity football at Briarcrest, he did not allow a single sack.
Not one. That's just unheard of. It proves his immediate technical dominance.
And he quickly went from fighting for a junior college spot to being overwhelmed by attention from every major Division I school in the country. He chose Ole Miss, primarily because he wanted to stay close to his support system.
He'd been separated from his family once before, and he wasn't about to give up the new stable family he had found.
Exactly. And he didn't just meet the academic standards at Ole Miss. He proved his critics dramatically wrong. He made the chancellor's list, which is like the dean's list for a 3.5 GPA or above twice.
Which completely discredited any lingering assumption that he was unintelligent or slow to learn the playbook. He was so focused on finishing his education before ever declaring for the NFL draft.
And this brings us squarely to Oher's perspective on the book and the movie, The Blind Side.
Right. While he was grateful for the inspiration it provided, he felt the film caused him significant personal and professional damage.
Because it fundamentally misrepresented his intelligence and his relationship with the game of football.
That wounded pride was real. He hated the scenes where he had to be taught the game, whether it was SJ moving ketchup bottles around or Leanne explaining blocking on the field.
The implication of the movie was that he needed this basic, childlike instruction to understand a game he had been intensely studying for years.
He emphasized that he had been studying the game since I was a little kid. He felt he was portrayed as intellectually dumb instead of being accurately portrayed as an intelligent kid who just lacked consistent academic instruction.
Unfortunately, that portrayal created real drama leading up to the NFL draft. Coaches were legitimately concerned about his intelligence. And ESPN analyst Todd McShay went even further, listing Oher as a riskiest pick due to supposed character issues, a comment Oher found totally baffling.
His college coach, Houston Nutt, publicly defended him, noting he was voted captain and was never belligerent, always hardworking. But the doubts persisted.
It led to an incredibly tense moment on draft day in 2009. Oher was sitting in the green room at Radio City Music Hall, watching player after player get selected.
He panicked for a second.
He did, thinking the comments or the concerns had finally spooked the teams. He ended up being the last person left in the room before the Baltimore Ravens selected him with the 23rd overall pick.
And when his name was finally called, he knew he had done the impossible. But he viewed being drafted not as a finish line, but as a starting point. He was committed to proving his professional potential. Oher's story resonated so far beyond the football field, proving the power of his experience to shift perspectives. He gets immense fan mail.
But the most important letters come from struggling kids and those working in child welfare, confirming the deep nationwide impact of his narrative.
The source material shares some deeply moving examples.
It does. There's Molly, a girl adopted from China, who writes to tell Oher he's one of her greatest heroes because he overcame impossible obstacles. A high school principal at a school for students with severe emotional and behavioral challenges took kids in custody to see the movie. They initially dismissed it as a fairy tale.
But the story forced them to confront the possibility that success is attainable, regardless of your background.
Exactly. There are also letters from at-risk teens in programs run by the YWCA and Sunrise Children's Services. Their takeaways are so simple but profound.
Learning not to quit, not to hang with the wrong people, and the realization that school's important and family is a key role in life.
One girl wrote that she realized she couldn't just blame her circumstances and feel sorry for herself. She had to change her own behavior.
And then there's the story of Jay, a senior football player who, inspired by Oher's journey, found a mentor family. This family literally hammered a wall just to get Jay's first ever bed into his room.
And now Jay, despite his own obstacles, is mentoring others. He learned that it is okay to give happiness a chance. This is the cycle Oher desperately wanted to inspire.
The ultimate lesson he provides is about breaking that generational cycle. He identifies his own mother as his ultimate anti-role model. He will always love her, but he made a conscious choice that he was not going to have her life.
He emphasizes that patterns of thinking, the instant gratification, the short-term focus are the toughest habits to break, and young people have to proactively commit themselves to something better.
His core advice points are highly practical, making this memoir a truly actionable roadmap. First, choosing friends.
Essential. He says you must keep your eyes open for good people. He used Michael Vick as a cautionary example, a talented player who ended up in prison because he kept hanging around with troublemakers from his old neighborhood.
Second, finding mentors. He says they become a new kind of family.
He counts Velma, Tony, Coach Johnson, Miss Sue. These people helped him see a better way of living, and they don't have to be professionals. They just have to be consistently caring.
Third, attitude control. He says it's the one thing you can always command, regardless of your circumstances. You have to believe in yourself.
And finally, self-reliance. This is the critical message. You don't have to be adopted by a rich family to make it. You can't sit around and wait for a loving family to show up. You have to commit to chasing your dream yourself.
He also stresses that this problem of struggling youth is everywhere, not just in inner cities, and that simple acts of kindness matter.
He believes every capable adult should pledge to find a way to give back. He provides concrete examples of organizations, too.
Locally, you can check with guidance counselors or volunteer at the YMCA or YWCA. Nationally, there's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Steady Buddy for online homework help.
And for those wanting to help kids specifically in the foster system, there are groups like Treehouse or Youth Villages, which offers critical transition support to kids up to age 22, helping them bridge that gap after they age out of the system.
Right. And he emphasizes the lesson of Miss Sue. You don't have to just put a roof over a kid's head. Academic support and skill building are equally vital needs that anyone can fill. This deep dive into Michael Oher's memoir reveals, so much more than a Cinderella story enabled by wealth. We see the profound statistical disadvantages he faced, the failing nature of the foster care system, especially the tragic way it misinterprets sadness as anger.
And the critical role of that self-determination combined with the structured academic and athletic support provided by figures like Big Tony and Miss Sue, that partnership was necessary for his miracle to happen.
It really was.
His legacy is truly a living testament for all the other Michael Ohers out there, currently facing those steep, depressing odds. He didn't just stumble into success, he achieved it through relentless work and fanatical discipline.
It forces you to stop and think about the nearly 500,000 children still suffering in foster care, trapped in these cycles, waiting for their next chance, and how crucial those brief moments of stability and mentorship are for their entire lives.
And that leads to a complex final thought Oher shared regarding the financial pressures that came with his success. He noted that even after making it to the NFL, some people from his past felt his new life obligated him to financially support them indefinitely.
I can imagine.
And he offers a stark warning, particularly to young people who make it out. Don't let anyone guilt you into thinking your success obligates you to them. That's one of the quickest ways to get sucked back into poverty. We've explored the massive emotional and academic effort required to escape poverty. So, what is the moral and personal responsibility of the escaped individual to avoid being pulled back by the financial demands of their past, even from loved ones? It's a question that really challenges the very meaning of success and family loyalty.
A tough question to chew on, and one that requires intense self-awareness. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the next set of sources you share.
Until next time.